Please welcome Dr. Mauro Rodriguez.
Thank you for the introduction. Today I'll be talking about the National Chapter Program, which is really the subtitle of this talk will be the chapter strategy for ship mission alignment. And so with that, let me go ahead and start with the some of the things you'll walk away with from this module. So by the end of this module, you'll be able to communicate the value of the National Chapter Program. You'll know the basics of the ship chapter ecosystem. You'll be able to educate your members and yourself on why, how, and what of the National Chapter Program. And then ideally, you'll be able to lead your chapter members throughout the year using the National Chapter Program. And so I will start by motivating some of the work as to why the National Chapter Program exists. And in reality, the things that I have personally done over the last, I want to say 7 years or so, is gathering the data, really trying to understand where Hispanic students, professionals are within the United States. And so here I show you some of the data that I've gathered over the last 7 years. This is a summary from 2020. We could obtain one from 2022, 2023. The numbers end up being approximately the same. And what I'm showing you is the American workforce and educational institutions and the Hispanic engineering pathways. I gathered some of this data from the American Society of Engineering Education and from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we understand more or less the following, that by the end of high school, Hispanic students are starting here. You can see my cursor here on the left-hand side. And then they progress into college. That is assuming if they progress into college. Some of them do not. But let us say that that portion or that percentage that actually pursues into college ends up lying on a spectrum, more or less. And then here I provide the two extremes of that spectrum. On one side, they're college thrivers. They fall into this virtuous cycle, or they end up being college survivors. This is a vicious cycle. One, as you can imagine, given that one is green here, means that it's positive, and the one that's colored red here means that it's negative. And these are intrinsically linked to the socioeconomic status of the Hispanic students as they go through college, and it connects directly to their academic performance and, as I said before, I mentioned before, their finances. And as a result, the metric that one could develop is the viability of these Hispanic students and their ability to actually complete the undergraduate degree with quality. Now, bear in mind here, I didn't specifically say complete, period. I said complete with quality, and I summarized this later in the student's ability to graduate successfully. But for what it stands right now in the country, there's approximately, and this number still holds true, around 101 or 100,000 Hispanic engineering undergraduate students are in the country at American institutions. If we look at the data, although I won't show the full data in detail today, you'll see that only 45% of the Hispanic students are able to complete or continue on in their degree afterwards. The remaining end up not finishing their program in engineering. And this percentage here specifically has remained relatively constant over the last decade or so. It has been decreasing, but it's maintained relatively constant. And so what you end up having is a population of, over the last 2 or 3 years, of around 50,000 Hispanic engineering students that graduate from college. And so here's what I've drawn very crudely here in this illustration, the bachelor's line, the students actually graduating with their bachelor's here. This flow, if you will, or this pathway gets rerouted to the students who end up not completing their engineering degree. And then you have here of the students that did graduate with their bachelor's, approximately only 16,000 graduate every year. This is on average. And however, only approximately less than 7,000 enter into the engineering workforce every year. This latter number is actually rather challenging to calculate. The reason why is because there is individuals who are already in the engineering profession in the U.S., which are recorded within the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, that are also leaving engineering to go to other professions. And so as a result, you can't always directly tell how many engineering undergraduate students are entering. And so what we end up doing is taking a longitudinal study and looking at the data over the span of over 10 years. And what you end up seeing is that the overall max flux that actually increases into the system is around 7,000. So we're able to project more or less that around 7,000 engineering undergraduate students that graduated with their engineering degrees enter into the workforce every year. It is the best approximation that one could get given the available data. The only other way would be to directly track these individuals, and that is not exactly directly accessible from any open available data sets. Now, of those numbers, you see here, these are the ones that are going towards industry. I have another chart down here that I'll show you later in a few seconds. But up above, very quickly, you see that you have to have this bachelor's line. You have to have this particular viability to enter this upper pathway, which is of that of graduate school. And there's actually less than 10,000 Hispanic engineering graduate students in the country at any given time. And later on, you actually see that a very small percentage of them actually graduate from their graduate degrees as well. It amounts to around 250 males, Hispanic males, that graduate every year, and approximately between 100 to 75 to 125 women, Latinas, that graduate every year with their engineering PhDs. And so as a result, there's less than 2% of the, usually between 3 to 4% of the faculty and executives in the workforce that are Hispanic. And so why is this latter number so important? Well, one of the main particular reasons why this latter number is so important is because, as many of you may know, it is faculty who are the educators of the people over here, of the undergraduate students, as well as the graduate students. And so it is of great vital importance that this number, as these numbers here continue increasing, that this number also keeps increasing in order to make sure that the front of the classroom looks like the classroom itself. And if the classroom itself is becoming more and more Hispanic, then it would behoove us to have, or rather behooves the American workforce to have the faculty also look like the classroom. And so we have to make continuous inroads into that. And one of the methods, the first method to be able to do that is to ensure that the Hispanic students that graduate don't just graduate. That is but the beginning. They have to be able to graduate successfully. Looking further, forward more into the industry itself and the American engineering workforce, when you combine all of the data, you have over 200,000, now it's actually over 220,000 Hispanic engineering professionals in the country. And here's the following breakdown. And at first, it would seem as if though it's rather benign. You see the other engineering subdisciplines: aerospace, chemical, civil, hardware, electrical, industrial, mechanical, and then all of the others in the disciplines here are captured in this 9.2%. It would seem rather benign in that you say, okay, there is the message perhaps gets somewhat diluted here regarding particular inequities within engineering, but that is actually not true. If you actually look at technicians and you see hardware engineers, they make up around a quarter of this pie. And if you actually look, and you can, in the U.S. Bureau of Statistics, in terms of their finances, specifically their salaries, you can see that a large proportion of the Hispanics that are within these fields have the lowest of the salaries within the comparatively with the other subdisciplines. So what this tells you is that there's 25, a quarter percent of the Hispanics that are in the engineering workforce are in these fields that are getting paid the least of all the other engineering disciplines. So once again, we come back to this notion that in order to achieve upward mobility, the empowerment to change the lives and align with the SHPE mission, one must not only ensure that the Hispanic students graduate, but that they graduate successfully. And upon entering the workforce, the professionals do not just enter into the workforce, but that they have the resources and skills necessary for them to achieve upward career mobility, and being able to also, along the way, achieve the SHPE vision, which is to be able to contribute in a positive way to their community. It is in this context that we now talk about the National Chapter Program, as it is a program directly aimed to what I just said, which is to ensure the post-graduation success of the members of the undergraduate students and the graduate students, as well as the career upward mobility of the Hispanics within the industries. How do we do this? We do this by ensuring that all of you are working together in an effective way. We believe very much so that in the collective effort is far more potent than that of the individual effort. And it's important that understanding that many of you have very intense engineering curriculum that you're going through, as well as the workforce demands upon you, as well as life in general for both undergraduate students, graduates, and professionals. It is for this reason that our ability to work together, to subside our differences and work together, that enables us to be able to maximize the output. And specifically here, the output would be us, right? Our own development, our own empowerment. So the first thing I should tell you is that how to access these materials. Well, the National Chapter Program materials are available on the Chapter Leaders Microsoft Teams channel, and this is the one major source where you'll be able to access the latest and greatest documentation. You should know that this is the only source from which you can get these materials. And to gain access, if you do not have access at this time, please email chapters@ship.org to obtain access to the channel. There you would be able to see the documentation. The chapter management tool, which I will talk in this module briefly, and then in detail in the second module, and the sponsorship brochure templates are available now. The National Chapter Guidelines and the Chapter Report template will be available by the end of July. Be aware that the reports will be due later, actually it will be due next year, in early January and in June. So you'll have plenty of time, and we'll talk about those in due time. But for now, be aware that if you do not have access, please email chapters@ship.org, and there you'll be able to access this tool, which we'll talk about in this module. So the National Chapter Program, or as I will call moving forward, the NCP, I will describe to you why it exists, how, and what. So the why it exists, why the national program exists, is for mission alignment, to ensuring that the SHIP chapters have an ability to be able to organize themselves in a strategic way and using their local ecosystem, that is including their employee resource groups, their university resources, and their local community as much as possible, in ensuring that they're able to ensure their own upward empowerment, as well as alignment with the SHIP mission. And there's compliance along there as well. And the sharing of best practices, we'll talk a little bit about that in a later date. And ensuring that you have recognition and, of course, support as much as possible in your efforts. How do we do this? We do this by using the chapter management tool, which I will then from now on call the CMT. And then we do chapter check-ins. We provide you a chapter sponsorship brochure template, and then evaluation and feedback. And if some of these things do not make sense right now, just hold on with me here, bear with me here for a few minutes, as I will get to these individual items in a few minutes. And what it really boils down to, what the program on a tangible level, what it is guidelines. It's a document around 10 pages long that specifies what can and cannot be done within the program, templates that we provide, and webinars such as these that are integrated within NILA. And it's also about submissions and deadlines. And then, of course, it's the awards and the support, in particular, the feedback that we provide to you. And I'll be sharing some of that here in a few minutes. So how do we achieve the SHIP mission alignment? And so the National Chapter Program provides a management framework to realize the SHIP mission. So how do you manage it's a framework how to manage your chapter. Chapters are required to participate in the National Chapter Program. The program consists of three major components, which is the CMT, the chapter management tool, the chapter reports, and the chapter sponsorship brochure. I will be talking at a later date, far later, about the chapter reports. For now, we'll be focusing primarily on the chapter management tool, and that will be the part of the second module. Also, you should know that we have different statuses in how we identify chapters, and that would be whether they're established, meaning they just started, they're active, they're struggling, they're inactive, or they're new. Okay. The chapter and this, I should mention this briefly, this is mostly for internal purposes in the way that we provide you support. And so if you're new, we provide you specific kinds of support. If you're established, that may be less or more depending on how you're active. And then if you're active, and then of course if you're struggling or inactive, that also varies the amount of support. And these These words are the ones that we use to be able to communicate clearly with regional leaders and with you in order for us to understand exactly what the resources and help that you need as you go from, for example, new, struggling, or inactive over to established or active. So the chapter ecosystem. I like talking about this slide in particular because it gives you a very high-level view of the way that we view chapters and how they should be operating, and how we see this cycle move and grow within the local chapter. If perhaps you've seen that your local chapter has started and it's growing, or it hasn't been growing and it's been struggling or not struggling in some ways or forms, you should know first that it starts with the sun or the community, right? The community that's already pre-built by the time you enter the chapter. Let's say, for example, a professional chapter, it has some community or no community. It has, or a university chapter, whether it's a brand new chapter or whether it's a very small chapter, you have some community or little to no community, or you're entering a very large SHPE chapter, which has a pre-established community. How it gets sustained, how it grows, is very much like a ecosystem in our natural environment. And so first you have the community. It supplies some heat into the system. And here I'm going to replace the word heat, although it is heat. Many of you work really, really hard and you do sweat as you're doing work within the SHPE events, etc. But I will say that it is ganas first that you provide into the system. And that leads to mentorship. And it really does start also with some form of money that you use in order to have events, for example. When this mentorship and this money evolves over time, it translates into governance. And you have your chapter leadership. This is what leadership is about, the governance and how you operate these events and the mechanisms, the strategies, the tactics that you unfold in the way that you navigate your money and your mentorship is of extreme importance, as well as how you communicate within your local ecosystem. That is to say, how you communicate, for example, at a university level with your SHPE chapter members or with the Hispanic undergraduate students or graduate students within your university, as well as at a professional level, how you communicate within the local community or within the employee resource group, etc. Okay, so all of that feeds into this governance and communications. That ability to then govern yourself and effectively communicate with your members can directly translate into more heat and more ganas and more increased or decreased, depending on how you look at it, member activity. Okay, depending if you have greater member activity and stronger the governance and communications takes place, you can then lead to a very sophisticated consequence, which is succession and legacy. Your ability as a member and as a leader is of extreme importance. This is really where the passion and the dedication of a leader is measured, through their ability to ensure strong governance and communication. Now, by strong governance, I mean effective governance, not tyrannical governance, as in it must be done my way, but rather that it must be effective at achieving the best outcome for all. That governance leads to to growth and member activity, that then leads to effective succession. And this is something of extreme importance for student leaders, because at the undergraduate level, at the student level, the student chapters, they have a cycle of around 4 years, 4 or 5 years, depending how long it takes them to graduate, where they're chapter leaders, and then they leave. They usually leave to industry or to graduate school or into the workforce in general. And the cycle continues with the next individual going for a chapter position. And so the ability of that chapter leader to empower their chapter members to be active and to participate over and over again leads to this succession and this legacy and the growth of the ecosystem as it leads back towards more mentorship and greater money. The stronger the outcomes are, the post-graduation success of the individuals, again, not just graduating, but graduating successfully, leads to more heat, more ganas into the system. And then this cycle continues over and over again. And really what I'm truly drawing here is a spiral as it leads towards this, the member success. Okay, and the same thing can be applied to the professional leaders as well. So how do we adapt this ecosystem into the national chapter program? Well, we look at it in the following way. Here, I just zoom in into this system. I simplify it a little bit further. This little cartoon: mentorship and money, governance and communications, member activity, succession and legacy. And we translate this into the following: to the national chapter program, where we have the chapter sponsorship brochure and familia. Then this is for mentorship and money. We then have the chapter management tool. This is for governance and communications. Member activity, CMT, and the reports are used here as well. And then membership success and the awards are the succession and legacy component that we use for this quadrant. So as you can see, we have documentation, we have the national chapter program and its three components clearly strategically positioned to work and operate within this ecosystem that's already naturally occurring within the chapters. So for the national chapter strategy here, what I give you here is a higher level view of the system, where the first thing that you do is you learn about the national chapter program. You then organize and manage your chapter, aligning it with the SHPE mission and mission strategy. This is something that you're doing now and you will be doing throughout the month of July and August. You'll then obtain feedback and support from the national and regional leaders. You will then go throughout the course of the SHPE year, which starts in July 1st and ends on June 30th of the following year, 2024, for example. And you'll host your events. You'll host your programs, your activities, etc., all oriented towards member success. If their events and the activities are not oriented to member success, you should perhaps rethink your event. But in general, most of you are doing really good and making sure your activities and events are organized towards the member success. And you should report quantitative accomplishments, and then we provide you feedback. Oh, sorry, both ways. Feedback's a two-way street here, where we provide you feedback and you also provide us feedback as to how to improve the program. What we're doing at a high level view overall is two things. One, we are, all of us, and this includes you, if you're hearing me, this includes you specifically, are working together to identify in a natural way. And by natural, I mean, as opposed to us or the organization imposing a national metric or standard. Instead, we're going to find in a natural way what that standard should be for all SHPE chapters, what these metrics should be that are uniform or can be uniformly applied to all SHPE chapters, given their available resources and skills. We can then aggregate all of that national standard data, and they can be used for multi-year financial grants and resources for you, the members. So the cycle is also not only at the individual level for the member and for the chapter, but also on a national scale. There's this larger, greater cycle that's also feeding into this. So it's just spirals upon spirals all the way down as we're trying to ensure to accomplish the SHPE mission. And then from there, we adjust the feedback and we use the feedback to adjust the regional tactics and the national strategy. And this cycle continues. And as you can imagine, the cycle continues iterating. It keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller into a spiral, into aligning or realizing the SHPE mission. How does this apply to you? Right, that's probably the first thing that comes up to many chapters leaders' minds is, how does this apply to me directly? All right, to my SHPE chapter. Well, you start your SHPE year, and you'll see here that as I continue on with this illustration, we're going to have a one-to-one matching with these major consequences. You'll go through SHPE quarter one, which is the first 3 months, July to September. You'll be organizing your chapter management tool. You'll gain feedback at that same time. You'll then undergo the NILA alignment. That'll be taking place all throughout July and August. Then you'll go to the SHPE National Convention, that's chapter Q2. Okay, you report your outcomes, your feedback in Q3. This is January 15th. And then you'll go through your elections. And then you'll go through National Chapter Report 2, and then you'll undergo feedback, and then you'll undergo an election transition, and then you'll continue on throughout the year. If I could zoom in very briefly here on the chapter management tool, which I'll talk about at greater depth in the following module, is you'll undergo an effective with the chapter management tool. It ensures that you can undergo an effective transition So we provide you two documents or two tools to do this, the board information and the SWOT analysis, where SWOT is an acronym. It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I'll talk more about that in the following module. And then there's the actual chapter schedule, which is shown here. And what it does, it ensures that you have mission alignment. It has your chapter management and goals. Okay, we provide you three major goals, which is the main operations of any ship chapter, which is to recruit members, retain them, and then ensure their success. That's three major functions. Those are three major goals. And then you develop your ship-oriented SMART objectives, where again, SMART is an acronym, stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Then you'll organize your events and your budget aligned to these objectives, which are aligned to these goals, which are aligned to the mission. So as you can see, all of these, this arc here is all sequentially aligned. And then once you align your budgets and your events, this will align your meetings. Okay. So with all of this, is organized into your chapter schedule. It's a one-stop shop, your one-stop to everything you do within the chapter. And what it really is supposed to be is a holistic document. It really is a glorified Excel sheet or a spreadsheet that's to be used at every meeting moving forward and making sure that what you're doing every time that you're doing it is aligned with the ship mission and organized with what you set out to do. I'm not particularly, nor is the National Chapter Program particularly interested in you coming up with a plan. Okay, you can come up with plenty of glorious plans, but the actual ability to execute and complete a plan is to have the systems, the habits in place to achieving that plan. And that's exactly what this glorified spreadsheet is aimed to do. It is a system. It is a habit. It is a schedule. It is a chapter management tool for you to manage your chapter. The CMT is a tool to be used continuously throughout the ship year and is used as your chapter executive board meeting agenda. It is required participation for board eligibility and for us to provide you feedback throughout the year. Okay. All right. So with that, I will then end here for this particular module and tell you that in the next module, I go into greater depth as to how do you actually work and organize this chapter management tool. There's a lot of wonderful content in there. And so we'll be talking more about that in the next module. But for now, you should be able to communicate the value of the National Chapter Program. You know the basics of what it takes to lead a ship chapter, right? The ecosystem. You use you'll be able to learn how to you learn how to use the chapter management tool throughout the year. And you'll have some ideas now and in the next module on how to draft your chapter schedule within the CMT. So with that, thank you.